Hey there, good morning, everybody. It is, Thursday, the 24th of June, 10 o'clock in the morning, right on the nose, and we're in 1 Kings, chapter number 7. So, real briefest of recaps. David dies, the son of Bathsheba, Solomon, becomes the new king, even though his brother Adonijah tried to take the kingdom from him. It didn't work. And now God gives Solomon incredible wisdom. He has more wisdom than anyone who ever has lived and ever will live would possess, and he has a time of peace. His father David fought all the battles, and now he has a time of peace. And so he's going to be able to get some things done. When you're not having to fight people, you can get things done. And so that's the luxury that Solomon has in front of him. So 1 Kings chapter 7, you're not going to be thrilled with this chapter. It's a good chapter. God gave it to us for a reason. But the whole chapter is talking about Solomon building a temple here. And it's all the materials, and it's a description of what's there. And so not earth-shattering, not mind-boggling. No one is going to say, boy, I'm really thankful for that chapter today. Maybe you will. I don't know. But we're just going to read through it, and that'll be our devotion for today. So let's go ahead and pray. Father, help us as we look into this chapter to take from it what you want us to have from it. I pray your blessing on our reading today. In Christ's name, amen. All right, 1 Kings chapter 7, verse number 1. But Solomon was building his own house 13 years, and he finished all his house. So we just read in chapter number 6 how he built the house of the Lord, the temple, and he only took 7 years to get that built. The first time I read that he took 13 for his own house and 7 for the Lord's house, I thought, wait a minute, Solomon, are you really putting twice as much time into your house as you did the Lord's house? And then after I thought it through a little bit, I'm sure there was a greater urgency to do the Lord's temple than there was his own house. Maybe the willingness to help on the part of the people was greater for the temple than it would be his own house. And so I don't think necessarily now that it's a matter of he had twice as elaborate a home. But we're told here it took 13 years to build his own house. Some of you who've built your own house before, you can understand that it's a nightmare scenario, but could you imagine that thing lasting 13 long years? Verse 2. He built also the house of the forest of Lebanon. The length thereof was 100 cubits, and the breadth thereof 50 cubits, and the height thereof 30 cubits, upon 4 rows of cedar pillars with cedar beams upon the pillars. Now this house of Lebanon, people talk about what it could possibly be. Some believe that it's just his house or maybe an extension of his house. Some say that it may have been a place that he built for the daughter of Pharaoh, which is one of his wives. And we're not told exactly what it is for sure, but it's a pretty grandiose structure here. Verse 3, and it was covered with cedar above upon the beams that lay on 45 pillars, 15 in a row. Can you imagine 45 pillars? How long that must have been. And there were windows in 3 rows, and light was against light in 3 ranks. And all the doors and posts were square with the windows, and light was against light in 3 ranks. And he made a porch of pillars. The length thereof was 50 cubits, the breadth thereof 30 cubits, and the porch was before them. And the other pillars and the thick beam were before them. Then he made a porch for the throne where he might judge, even the porch of judgment, and it was covered with cedar from one side of the floor to the other. And his house where he dwelt had another court within the porch, which was of the like work. Solomon made also an house for Pharaoh's daughter, when he had taken to wife like unto this porch. So that's where that idea comes from there. I'm going to cast a little bit of light here on this situation. It's been something I've needed to do. I might have to get a Bible with darker type. This type is really small. Anyhow, here we go. Verse number 9. All these were of costly stones, according to the measure of hewed stones, sawed with saws within and without, even from the foundation unto the coping, and so on the outside toward the great court. And the foundation was of costly stones, even great stones, stones of 10 cubits, stones of 8 cubits, and above were costly stones after the measures of hewed stones and cedars. And the great court round about was with 3 rows of hewed stones and a row of cedar beams, both for the inner court of the house of the Lord and for the porch of the house. And King Solomon sent and fetched Hiram of Tyre. And he was a widow's son of the tribe of Naphtali, and his father was a man of Tyre, a worker in brass, and he was filled with wisdom and understanding and cunning to work all works in brass. And he came to King Solomon and wrought all his work. So this man Hiram now is being brought from Tyre, a neighboring country that Solomon is an ally with, and he's going to help do all of the brass work of the temple here. Verse number 15, for he cast 2 pillars of brass of 18 cubits high apiece, and a line of 12 cubits did compass either of them about. So let's just think about this for a minute. 18 cubits high, a cubit's roughly 18 inches, so 1.5 feet, so you're talking about 27 feet high. So he's got 2 pillars that are 27 feet in length, made out of brass. Now we can see why this is taking 13 years to get done, right? And this is just the tip of the iceberg here. And he made 2 chapiters of molten brass to set upon the tops of the pillars. The height of the one chapiter was 5 cubits, and the height of the other chapiter was 5 cubits. And so a chapiter is just a topper, or it could also be a base for a pillar. Verse number 17, and nets of checker work and wreaths of chain work for the chapiters, which were upon the top of the pillars, 7 for the one chapiter and 7 for the other chapiter. And he made the pillars in 2 rows round about upon the one network to cover the chapiters that were upon the top with pomegranates, and so did he for the other chapiter. So think of this all as ornate detailing made of brass on these pillars and chapiters. So again, we can see how long it takes to get this all done. Verse 19, and the chapiters that were upon the top of the pillars were of lily work in the porch 4 cubits. And the chapiters upon the 2 pillars had pomegranates also above, over against the belly, which was by the network. And the pomegranates were 200 in rows round about upon the other chapiter. And he set up the pillars in the porch of the temple. And he set up the right pillar and called the name thereof Jachin. And he set up the left pillar and called the name thereof Boaz. And upon the top of the pillars was lily work. So was the work of the pillars finished. And so this is just the work of the pillars on the outside of the temple. If you ever get a notion, just Google Solomon's temple. You'll be able to look at some pictures and see some things there. Verse 23, and he made a molten sea, 10 cubits from the one brim to the other. It was round all about, and his height was 5 cubits, and a line of 30 cubits did compass it round about. And under the brim of it round about there were knops compassing it 10 in a cubit, compassing the sea round about. The knops were cast in 2 rows. When it was cast, it stood upon 12 oxen, there looking toward the north, and 3 looking toward the west, and 3 looking toward the south, and 3 looking toward the east. And the sea was set above upon them, and all their hinder parts were inward. And it was an handbreadth thick, and the brim thereof was wrought like the brim of a cup, with flowers of lilies. It contained 2,000 baths. So this is a basin to wash and prepare the sacrifices before they were offered to God. And it's like a giant swimming pool, if you can envision that. It's sort of like a semicircle, straight on one edge and rounded on the other. The dimensions here, we'd have to go back through it again, but it's pretty massive. It's about 15 feet across and about 30 feet wide. The depth of it in the deepest part was over 8.5 feet. And then they would bring in the sacrifices to wash them. It's being borne by these brass oxen. There are 12 brass oxen, 3 on each side facing different directions, and the faces are facing out. This thing is massive. It's incredibly heavy, tens of thousands of gallons of water to fill it and keep it filled. And so what we're getting an idea of here is the massiveness of this project and how detailed and intricate Solomon wanted it to be. Verse number 27, and he made 10 bases of brass. 4 cubits was the length of one base, and 4 cubits the breadth thereof, and 3 cubits the height of it. And the work of the base was on this manner. They had borders, and the borders were between the ledges. And on the borders that were between the ledges were lions, oxen, and cherubims. And upon the ledges there was a base above, and beneath the lions and oxen were certain additions made of thin work. And every base had 4 brazen wheels and plates of brass, and the 4 corners thereof had undersetters. Under the laver were undersetters molten at the side of every addition. And the mouth of it within the chapiter and above was a cubit, but the mouth thereof was round after the work of the base, 1.5 cubits, and also upon the mouth of it were gravings with their borders, 4 square, not round. And under the borders were 4 wheels, and the axletrees of the wheels were joined to the base, and the height of a wheel was 1.5 cubits, and the work of the wheels was like the work of a chariot wheel. Their axletrees and their naves and their felloes and their spokes were all molten. And there were 4 undersetters to the 4 corners of one base, and the undersetters were of the very base itself. And at the top of the base was there a round compass of 0.5 cubit height, and on top of the base of the ledges thereof, and the borders thereof were of the same. For on the plates of the ledges thereof, and on the borders thereof, he graved cherubims, lions, and palm trees, according to the proportion of every one, and additions round about. After this manner he made the 10 bases. All of them had 1 casting, 1 measure, and 1 size. He's got these 10 bases that are made. Animals are configured in them. Wheels. The whole thing is brass. Honestly, I'm not sure exactly what these were used for. My ignorance. But 10 of them in number. Verse number 38. Then made he 10 lavers of brass. 1 laver contained 40 baths, and every laver was 4 cubits. And upon every one of the 10 bases 1 laver. And he put 5 bases on the right side of the house, and 5 on the left side of the house. And he set the sea on the right side of the house, and eastward over against the south. And Hiram made the lavers, and the shovels, and the basins. So Hiram made an end of doing all the work that he made, King Solomon, for the house of the Lord. The 2 pillars, and the 2 bowls of the chapiters that were on the top of the 2 pillars, and the 2 networks to cover the 2 bowls of the chapiters, which were upon the top of the pillars, and 400 pomegranates for the 2 networks, even 2 rows of pomegranates for 1 network, to cover the 2 bowls of the chapiters that were upon the pillars. And the 10 bases, and the 10 lavers on the bases, and 1 sea, and 12 oxen under the sea, and the pots, and the shovels, and the basins, and all the vessels, which Hiram made to King Solomon for the house of the Lord, were of bright brass. In the plain of Jordan did the king cast them, in the clay ground between Succoth and Zarethan. And Solomon left all the vessels unweighed, because they were exceeding many, neither was the weight of the brass found out. So they made so many things, and so many heavy things. They're like, do you want us to weigh all these so we know exactly what it all... No, don't even bother. There's too much here to deal with. So we've got now all these lavers built around the temple, no doubt for the priests to wash in so that they can manage the number of sacrifices that are coming their way, all the priests helping to deal with the sacrifices that the people brought. Verse 48, and Solomon made all the vessels that pertained unto the house of the Lord. the altar of gold and the table of gold whereupon the showbread was, and the candlesticks of pure gold, 5 on the right side and 5 on the left before the oracle, with the flowers and the lamps and the tongs of gold, and the bowls and the snuffers and the basins and all the spoons and the censers of pure gold, and the hinges of gold, both for the doors of the inner house, the most holy place, and for the doors of the house, to wit, of the temple. So it was ended, all the work that King Solomon made for the house of the Lord. And Solomon brought in the things which David his father had dedicated, even the silver and the gold and the vessels, did he put among the treasures of the house of the Lord. So, we have Solomon remanufacturing all of the things that Moses and the children of Israel did early on when the tabernacle was built. So the table of showbread and the lampstand and all of that. He rebuilds all of that, makes it fresh and new, and this new temple is now completed, and it's fully furnished. And the thing that we see here and the thing that we take away from it is God's business is worthy of our best. God is deserving of all of our best sacrifices, our best gifts, our best time, our best labors, our best energy. God should get our best. Jesus said, I must be about my Father's business. Sometimes you use that word business in the work of the Lord, and people, they kind of catch you askew, but it is the business of God. And God's business is the greatest business in all of the world. We should maximize and exalt the business of God, not minimize and lower it in the eyes of the people. And here that's what Solomon's doing. He's making all of these things glorious and ornate and amazing. Why? So that God's business can be perceived as the most important business going on. He puts the building of God's house before the building of his own house. His own house takes twice as long to build because there's not the same urgency that's there for God's house. And then we see all the things that David had procured. Solomon brings those things into the temple. So what David was not able to do in building the temple, his son was able to do. And each generation should be able to build off of the labors of the previous generation. Take what's already been given to us, the patterns that have been given, and let's not rebuild the wheel. You don't have to re-engineer what's already been proven and shown to work. Let's take what they've given us and let's move forward for the kingdom of the Lord. All right, 17 minutes, a lot of just reading there. I know maybe it seemed a little bit mundane, but it's interesting to know all that God had Solomon do to make this a great place for the Lord. All right, I'll leave you alone with that. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., same time, same place. We'll be in chapter number 8. But thanks for watching, as always. Please do like, love, and share the post. Get the word out there, and we'll talk to you later. God bless you. Have a great Thursday.